All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very important and prominent guest this week. Very, very special to the history of motor racing. Very, very special to the greatest racetrack in the world. A part of my family, a very important part of my family. J. Douglas Boles, thank you for being here, a guest on the Speed Street podcast. We are here at the racetrack. You are in another room. We are in another room. But this is professional podcasting. How do we feel after day one of a little bit of rain in the practice yesterday? But obviously it looks great now. Are we feeling good for the rest of the week?
Yeah, I think we feel good, certainly for today and tomorrow. You know, you never know Indiana weather where it's going to end up being. Friday looks kind of iffy, and who knows what the weekend's going to hold. But you know, I've gotten to the point where I just don't worry about the weather. You can't do anything about it. So you just try and stay focused and hope that every day when you get here, it's going to be a beautiful sunny day like it is right now this morning. A little bummed out yesterday. We maybe should have waited around a little longer because by the time 5 o'clock rolled around, the racetrack was pretty dry, and sunset over here is up, 8:30. So we could have run you guys all night.
Yeah, I think for those that were here, honestly, great crowd yesterday, first of all. Joey, I don't know if you noticed that, but a lot of people here. Garages were full. A ton of people interacting and wanting to see practice on Tuesday, day one, which, again, I honestly feel it in my heart. I feel bad that we can't do anything. Like, when we got out there, like, at one moment in the day, all of a sudden it was drying out, and I was, like, literally doing an appearance for Mount Comfort RV. I was over at their little place. And it started drying out, and I was like, I should probably go back because I think we're going to go on track. Sure enough, I literally get to the garage, and they're like, yeah, go to pit lane right now. And we're like, okay, all right. All the drivers are running to pit lane. Like, this happens on the fly because if you stop here in the jet dryers, right, Doug, that means that they've been called back, and we might be able to go on track. So that was kind of what happened yesterday. How close were we to, like, was it a 10-minute? Like, were we 10 minutes earlier? Then we could have gone out maybe for install laps.
I think we were within 4 or 5 minutes actually of going out on track when the drizzle started coming again. And you're right, when those jet dryers go up, it means one of two things: we're about to go on track, or it's raining again. And obviously it wasn't. So it was kind of fun to watch everybody scramble. And I at one point in time looked up at the monitor, and Ed Carpenter's car was being towed out in pit lane almost faster than I think the car goes on track. They were hurrying so much to get that car in the pit lane. The teams were definitely scrambling.
Now, I'm a little ignorant to all this, but when I think, okay, president of IMS, I'm thinking that's president. You got the last call. What's the process in terms of the weather, how you get out there, who has to decide for a situation like we had on Tuesday?
I think there are three really important components in those decisions. One of them is obviously the NTT IndyCar series. So I talked to Jay several times throughout the day. Jason Penix on the Speedway team is in race control, so he's sort of my voice to what's going on in race control as well. And Jason and Jay touch base certainly. And then the other piece we have to think through is our NBC Peacock relationship, making sure that they're comfortable with everything. So they would have been fine, obviously, because they were planning on doing things until 6. The conversation with them really would have been more important if we said, hey, we're going to go to 7 or later to make sure that they continue to cover it. But Jay and I talked several times yesterday, and actually a little before 4, when we made a decision to go ahead and shut things down, we both on the phone thought, what'll happen when we do this? And then certainly it did. It dried right up, and by a little after 5, everything was ready to go.
Well, it's almost like racing science. I was in the pit lane getting ready to get in the car, and they told me, well, you should probably get in because we might go out. And I said, as soon as I get in, it'll start raining more. And sure enough, as soon as you get in the car, it starts raining more. It's motorsport science. It's what happens. If there was an ESPN segment about that, they would do that, sports science.
Don't bring us.
Yep, exactly. But I think, not to stay too much on the rain, but I think folks always find this interesting. And I think Callum Eilot or a couple other drivers, even Colton Herta, I think, asked me yesterday, like, there's obviously the Air Titan, and then there's the jet dryers, but there's obviously a certain cost, like, that it comes with the Air Titan, and, like, people see the Air Titans really for race weekends, probably. That's the most. And the track doesn't necessarily own Air Titans. Like, you don't have a bunch of Air Titans just packed away in the museum somewhere, right? Like, you have to bring those in for race weekend, but the jet dryers you have here, What is the difference in drying time? Do you know? And is that really only a race weekend or qualifying weekend thing? Do you have them for qualifying too?
So the Air Titans, we actually rent from NASCAR for race weekend. So they come in on that Wednesday or Thursday of race week. We have them here for carb day. In fact, I think we had them out during carb day last year to make sure that we could dry things off. And that's a $40,000, $45,000 spend to have those come in and just be on standby, even if you never use them. And then we've got 6 or 7 jet dryers here on our own. A jet dryer costs about $2,500 an hour to run a jet dryer. So when you've got 6 jet dryers out there for an hour, that bill goes up pretty quickly. I think our team would argue that at some level, we think the jet dryer is just as effective and can be just as quick as the Air Titans, especially if you've got some sun and wind to help things. Our track tends to dry really, really quickly compared to a lot of other tracks, especially tracks that are flat. But those Air Titans, when we've got them, it's just one more piece of equipment that can really help us just expedite that. Or you can get Air Titans to focus on the racetrack and the jet dryers on pit lane, or vice versa. The more you have to throw at drying the track off, the better off you are. But we don't feel like we really need it on a day like yesterday, or frankly for qualifying. We think those jet dryers, applied the right way, can be just as effective.
Doug, I've been doing a lot of studying on past 500s, watching a lot of old ones with my son at 5 a.m. This month. And we all know that, you're first and foremost, you're a huge race fan and a fan of this hallowed ground. What's your favorite 500 ever?
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's such a tough question. It's funny, I've been working with the folks at NBC and a handful of other people to try and highlight the top 10 Indianapolis 500s. It's so hard because some of the racing was great.
Top 10? Wow. Mm-hmm. Top 10 would be a great list.
But it's hard, right? Because some of them, the racing was great, but maybe there weren't those big iconic moments. You have like a Danny Sullivan spin and win. That race wasn't necessarily the greatest race in the world, but that's one of the most iconic moments. So it's just really hard to define it. So I probably have 3 favorite races. 1977, which was my first 500, and I was such an A.J. Foyt fan. For him to win his 4th Indianapolis 500 probably ranks right up there. And just the memories of walking through the gates with my dad, and so many people fell in love with this place generationally, right? Because their granddad or their dad or whoever. So I have that memory. I have that memory at some level. Every day I walk into Speedway, I think about parking in the town of Speedway and walking through gate 1, seeing the big guy with the Jesus Saves rainbow hair standing out front. Those memories as a 10-year-old still stick with me. And then the other 2, 2013 was a big year for me. I wasn't quite president yet. I knew I was ultimately going to be. I was the chief operating officer that year. Tony Kanaan finally wins an Indy 500. And there's nobody really that has been as passionate about that over the last couple of decades as TK was. Conor's first Indianapolis 500. So that was a really important race for me. And then 2021, for the same sort of 2 reasons, Elio Castroneves was a 4th, and that was pretty spectacular to see the way he celebrated, and the coolness of now having another 4-time winner that we can help continue to promote the Indianapolis 500, and then Conor leading his first Indianapolis 500. So those would probably be the 3 that are the ones that stick out in my mind as personally my most favorite.
This place, obviously, I mean, those are some good ones. I mean, not bad. This place has some incredible history, some incredible things that happened here, obviously. But I would say that you are, most heavily involved, I would say at a higher level than, let's say, most track presidents that I've seen. Like I've noticed, I've met a lot of track presidents that have been great and like love their facilities and stuff like that. I believe we got a question on Twitter too, which I think is interesting. But like, do you have, other than IMS, like what's your like favorite facility? Like, what's your favorite track? And like track, let's say, like not just track, but like who does the best job, you think, other than you guys here at the Speedway when it comes to track management, facility, all that stuff?
Well, there's an awful lot of great track presidents, track managers around the country. I probably have the closest relationship I have, and one of the guys I really appreciate is Greg Walter, who runs Charlotte Motor Speedway. And part of that is because we have a mutual respect for each other. We sort of own Memorial Day Sunday, and we communicate on how are we going to continue to promote each other's events. They take the evening, we get the day, and we work pretty closely together. And I think that facility does a pretty good job of doing all kinds of different events and creative. We're both dirt track promoters at the same time, so there's a lot of things that we share in common. So that's definitely Definitely one of the tracks that I really appreciate. I love going to Gateway. I love Curtis and Chris and the things that they do over at Gateway. And part of that for me is it's another oval track, right? So I love oval racing. And I think it's really important that we continue to try and keep that healthy. And then this will sound a little bit crazy, but I love Reese O'Connor and Kokomo Speedway. I mean, I think about just historic racetracks, and here's a guy that's a weekly racetrack promoter, a quarter-mile dirt track in sort of the middle of Indiana, and Reese and the gang at Kokomo do great work. And anytime I have a chance to go hang out at Kokomo in the dirt, that's a pretty good weekend for me.
What and when can we expect to see some new developments going on outside of the track, right off 16th and that turn 2 gate entrance right across the street?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that Roger said right away in November of 2019, actually the day that it was announced that he was going to purchase the Speedway, is he really wanted to focus on the racing, keep it going, but also wanted to make this more of an entertainment destination. And then obviously COVID hits and the whole thing changed, right? It used to have our focus really on get the 500 healthy again. Let's get it back to what we expected it to be when he bought it. So that's really been our focus 2021, 22, and even a little bit this year. Let's just really focus on our core business. But we are now beginning to talk again about, let's look at our 1,000 acres, not just the 300 acres that are inside the Speedway, but let's look at our entire 1,000-acre campus. Let's work with the town of Speedway and the city of Indianapolis and try and figure out exactly what we can do, especially with the property across the street. The property across the street houses the IndyCar offices, the Penske Entertainment or IMS offices are across the street. What can we do with that piece of property? How do we make this a destination point? But also, if you think about it, it's the anchor to the west side of the city as you lead downtown. So how can we make that a catalyst to help spur development between our property and 16 Tech, which is an area downtown? How can we help grow that 16th Street corridor and just really create some economic redevelopment in the whole area? So that's our focus. I think you'll see a lot of movement there, probably beginning in 24 and 25 as we really start planning those things out.
I got an idea. I'll throw my hat in if I can just get this out there. All right, so right across the street, and it just becomes a whole strip of bars and watering holes, and you call it the pit stop. And then you have a whole campaign, bar hop at the pit stop, and then it leads you right into the Motor Speedway.
I like that idea. That would be okay with me, certainly, and I think a lot of folks would like that. But that's the idea, right? We need to find a way to create some sort of destination place where people want to be. It probably has to have some sort of racing theme, or at least a real connection to the racetrack in the town. And that's going to take work from not just the Speedway and Penske Entertainment, but it's going to take work from the town of Speedway and the city of Indianapolis, and some level of the state of Indiana, to really think about what do we want this area to look like. There's about 400 acres of property that are south of the IndyCar offices that are owned by some private folks in the town together, and those folks all need to be included and figure out how do we really make this a destination location.
So we got a couple questions here from fans as well that have got involved, and I think some of these are interesting. There's one that is, what started the idea behind the president's pin? I guess there's a president's pin of some sort, and this person that asked, you gave one to their daughter, so obviously they love that. And now the two-seaters are running behind us, so in case you hear that sound, that's part of the podcast now.
It's all right, cars on track, baby.
Yeah.
We're excited.
Yeah, so the President Pin started in 2016. It was something that I wanted to do. People give challenge coins out, the military and other give challenge coins out, but that's pretty limited.
Those are great.
And really, I know this doesn't sound the right way. I didn't care to give something necessarily to an old fan like me. I wanted to be able to get down on my knee and hand something to a young kid and say, hey, thanks for coming, and try and make a moment that a kid would remember and say, you know what, I'm going to be a fan of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500. So I created these, or our creative team, I asked them to create these pins called President Pins. So we did our first one in 2016, and we've had a different one every year. So I have one this year that I give out, and it's only for kids. I used to give them to anybody, but then I started to see them for sale online. And then I thought, that's not cool. This is really not supposed to be a collector's item. This is supposed to be a connecting point for kids. So like last year's pin I have right here is just a little state of Indiana pin. It says back home again because we were back home again. And I've got this year's is just a little oval and it just got my name and the date on it. And I hand it to a kid and say, hey, thanks. And I say to the parent, hey, thanks for bringing kids. Is the most important thing we do. So it's just a really cool way to connect with a kid and hopefully put a seed in their brain that, you know what, IndyCar's cool.
Last one for me before we get to the hardcore fan questions like Conor was talking about, and I just have to ask because we talk about it pretty regularly on the show. So to have the president of IMS on, I have to bring it up. How does IMS and how do you continue to battle Formula One and the growing popularity, but then also the nonsense that they try to spew about taking away trademark type of things from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot on the show, obviously, and I think Doug and my mother have listened every now and then to the show.
Yeah.
We obviously think that IndyCar and IMS should be suing the pants off of F1, right. But yeah, obviously you have the more business mind, so let us know, I guess, what the thoughts are on that.
Well, the mark's clearly ours, right? I mean, it's the greatest spectacle of racing. I don't care how you rearrange the words; it's still ours. And when we first heard it, we thought this can't be right. And then we began to see it a little bit more, sort of mostly initially connected to the Vegas race. And so we reached out and decided the right way to do it was through just sort of personal connection. And then we drafted a more formal letter that was still not totally legal. It came from, we pinned it from Mark to sign, and we sent that to the folks at Liberty and said, hey, this is clearly our mark. As we've discussed, we'd like you to stop using it. They responded that they would stop using it and make sure that in places where they had previously used it, they would try and scrub that so it wasn't around. And then we thought we were fine. And then Miami happens and pre-race, and so it's caused us to have to have another conversation. You know, the last thing we want to do is get in a situation where we're suing somebody. But in the intellectual property world, if you want to protect your mark, you have to vigorously defend it. And that's why you get in, sometimes you see the weird stories about the NFL cracking down on the small church who's having a NFL watching party. Well, they have to, because if they don't do it there, then it takes away their leverage to be able to protect it in situations where they really have to. So we are taking it seriously. I think Liberty understands we're taking it seriously. And basically we said, hey, we're race fans. We want you to be successful. But hey, it's our mark. Go create your own. Go create your own history. Go create your own connection to the Speedway, and leave us alone. And I think ultimately that's where it'll end up.
Well, I think we see it so often with the Super Bowl, right? You can't say Super Bowl. Like people, like right. you have to say the big game or the superb owl. Like I remember that. Like there's things that you have to use, and that's like, I think, very obvious to people. Like people know that, like when you say right. the big game, like all right, okay, yeah, we can't say Super Bowl. So it is something that I completely agree with. Like the fact that they cannot use it is. I mean, yeah, we should be, showing up with swords and shields at their offices, a bunch of IndyCar fans if we need to. Like
I'll lead the charge.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's absurd, especially since they don't really do a lot of racing in that motor racing series. But I think we have a lot here as well, but we don't want to take up too much of your time. I think there's an interesting question that I saw from fans. Do you actually get to watch many of the sessions? Like when we're out there, do you take some time to see what's going on? Like, obviously, we got 6 hours of practice. We got like 7 hours today, something like that. But do you actually, I assume there's a lot going on from a operational standpoint, but you also have a lot of employees. So do you get to watch many of the sessions? Do you get to watch many of the things that are going on out there aside from doing the business?
I don't get to watch very much, unfortunately. That's the challenge of where we are. Today, for example, as we're getting ready to go, I'm pretty much back to back until about 3:00 today. And then that's including, then inside all that, I'm trying to keep up with phone calls and, other things as stuff comes about. So for the most part, I will put the app on my phone or in my trackside office here, which is really a broom closet. I have a little TV in here, so I'll at least have timing and scoring up so I can kind of keep track of what's going on. And if there's an incident on track, I get an alert, and then I'll try and spend a few minutes just making sure everything's okay there. The track's okay, safer wall's okay, driver's okay, all those things to make sure that we're moving forward. But even race day is not a great thing for me in terms of being able to watch it. I'll watch, I'll watch the start, I get to drive one of the Camaros at the front of the grid, which is awesome. I get in the track just in time. Usually I park inside of turn one and get out of the car and watch you guys all scream through turn one. And that's about all I get to watch then. And the rest of the time I'm just trying to solve problems and help the team execute for our 325,000 fans that are here.
I have a quick question. So one of my favorite moments from this year from Media Day was when Beth Boles went in and ambushed Conor's interview. Could you give us a little insight on whose idea that was?
It was probably my idea. I don't know that I want to admit that, but we actually had done one day of Media Day before the day that Conor and several other drivers came through, and we were doing these Doug and driver meetings. We had 10 drivers, I think, that we were doing, and we were trying to do these weekly conversations leading up to the Indianapolis 500. So we had them planned out on exactly who was going to be where. And we knew we were going to use Conor to kick the month of May off. Nobody really more popular in this community at the racetrack than Conor, having led the last two 500s. It's just a really cool story. Only Indianapolis-born or Central Indiana-born driver in the field. Throw a couple of them that really are residents. Obviously, a lot of folks have relocated here. And so we were driving from Palm Springs Convention Center back to Thermal, and Beth was with me. I said, I got a crazy idea, and I don't know if this will work or not, but what if we plan this thing, we get things started, I act like I'm getting a phone call, I'll say to Zach, hey, I don't want to waste Conor's time, so the whole thing plays out, and Beth in the car says, I don't want to do that. That's why she said, well, Conor won't like it, and I won't be any good, and it just won't work. I said, and then so as we talked through the evening, went to bed, and she wasn't in, and then the next day, Zach Horrell, who does a lot of our social media, said, we think this is a great idea. It could be really funny. And honestly, the only reason it worked is because Conor was the way he was. Had Conor just said, okay, I'm going to be serious about this and just treat it like an interview, it would have been terrible. But the fact that he treated it like every kid would treat it if his mom sat down and was going to interview him made it so perfect, right? I mean, it's exactly how if my mom sat down and started interviewing me, I'd like, Mom, I got business to do. I don't want to talk about my facial hair and the whole thing. So, but the great part so after Beth knew Zach wanted to do it, then she started talking about, well, here's what I think I'll do. And it just, frankly, it worked out because of the way Conor's reactions were. It's hysterical, right? It's exactly how it should have worked. And had Conor just answered the questions, it would not have been nearly as funny.
This is the last one I got, and it's also from CowKid1 on Instagram. Any red carpet guests to hint or announce, and also green flag. Who's waving it? Do we have any idea?
So I think we have. So today we're taping this is Wednesday. We have an announcement tomorrow. We'll have an announcement Friday, announcement Monday, and announcement Tuesday. So all those things will start to unfold here over the course of the next 5 or 6 days. I think the last announcement we'll make is a pace car driver. I think we do that next Tuesday.
Nice.
So they're all sorted. They're all set. I'm really excited about the green flag. I think it's going to connect really well to that. There's a huge group of people who may not be race fans who probably follow this person. So I think that's one of the key things you really try and do when you bring somebody like that in from a name standpoint. So I'm looking forward to that. But that all starts here over the next couple of days.
That's awesome. Well, Doug, I don't want to take up too much of your time, as we know there's a lot going on here, and we also got to record the rest of our show too. So thank you so much for being a part of our show. And before you go, though, tell us maybe a year that we should use. I know you love our Random Indy 500 Driver of the Week segment. Do you have a year for us for the Random Indy 500 Driver of the Week segment that we could choose for this week's Ricky Shredway Random Indy 500 Driver of the Week?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do love
a random year.
Your last one was a hit.
I do love the segment. What I love about the segment is sometimes you guys come up with names that for people who grew up especially through the 60s and 70s or even the 80s, and they have some weird names, and it's fun to watch the way you guys pronounce them, and that's what makes it beautiful. You could do a lot of the work on the front and to get them exactly right, but it wouldn't be nearly as fun. I don't have one in particular off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of something that would fit really well. Maybe 1972, which would be Roger's first win year. It's a Mark Donohue year. It's one of the coolest cars to win the Indy 500. That's Sunoco. a 66 with a big, massive wing on the back. That's back in the
72.
day when they had tires the size of the car, and they had super speed down the front stretch, and then they had to figure out how to get through the corners. So a 72 race might be a fun one because you're going to probably get a mix of road race drivers in there as well as some crazy short track driver names. So you might be able to find a good name in 1972.
All right, but we're doing 1972.
Yep.
Doug Boles,
Boss man.
thank you so much.
All right, guys.
We'll see you on the track today after all you're done with all your meetings.
All right, good luck today.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.